It was barely sunrise when the Marines at Gate 7 noticed a shape limping toward the base. It was Ranger, once the toughest K9 on the force. Ranger dragged himself across the concrete, trembling, soaked from rain and covered in mud. Clenched between his teeth was a small burlap sack, dark and heavy. Marines sprinted toward him, weapons raised, unsure if this was an attack, a warning, or something far worse. At first, the guards reached for their rifles, thinking he was a wounded stray or a wild animal. Before anyone could touch him, Ranger forced himself upright. He barked sharply, then shoved the muddy sack forward with his paw, demanding they look inside. The Marines hesitated. Then one of them froze. "That's Ranger," he whispered, "the retired K9 who vanished months ago." Ranger staggered forward, whimpering. He placed the sack at the Marine's feet, then slowly raised one paw, begging, almost pleading. The Marines opened the sack, expecting food, or maybe one of Ranger's old toys. What they found instead made every soldier step back in shock, because inside that muddy sack was something no one could have imagined. Something that revealed where Ranger had been, what he had survived, and why he had returned alone, desperate for help. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning fog still clung to the ground when the Marine on duty at Gate 7 spotted movement at the far end of the road. At first, he thought it was debris drifting in the wind, until the shape stumbled, then struggled upright again. As it drew closer, the Marine's breath caught. It wasn't debris. It was a German shepherd, thin, soaked, limping, dragging a small burlap sack clenched tightly in his jaws. "Hey, someone get over here," he shouted, waving others forward. Two Marines rushed out. When the dog finally reached them, he collapsed to his elbows, panting heavily. Mud coated his fur, and one of his paws bled from a deep cut. But even in his exhaustion, his eyes held determination. One Marine knelt, recognition flooding his face. "No way, Ranger? That's Ranger. He retired last year. He disappeared on that wilderness mission with Staff Sergeant Cole." The other Marine swallowed hard, staring at the sack. Deep claw marks shredded the sides as if something, or someone, had fought desperately to hold on to it. Ranger lifted his head, placed one paw on the Marine's boot, and nudged the sack toward him, whining softly, not asking for help, begging for it. The Marines carried Ranger inside the security booth, laying him gently on a dry blanket. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes never left the small burlap sack lying on the table. Every time someone reached for it, Ranger tried to push himself up, as if insisting they open it. Now, Sergeant Miller carefully untied the soaked string. The moment he unfolded the top, a heavy silence settled over the room. Inside wasn't food. It wasn't equipment. It was a single military ID tag, bent, scratched, stained with dried mud. Staff Sergeant Cole's ID tag. Miller's throat tightened. This can't be real. Cole's been missing for months. Another Marine leaned closer, noticing something wrapped beneath the tag. He lifted a torn scrap of fabric, the corner of a uniform sleeve. Embedded in the sleeve was a smear of dried blood and a slash mark that could only have come from a blade. Ranger whined urgently. The dog crawled forward, placing his muzzle near the tag. His ears flattened as he nudged it toward Miller again, insisting they understand. The Marines exchanged uneasy glances. Ranger had traveled miles in brutal condition. He hadn't brought back a body, he had brought back a message. Miller exhaled shakily. "Cole's alive. He has to be." Ranger wouldn't have come back unless. Before he could finish, Ranger forced himself onto his feet. He limped to the door, looked back at the Marines, and barked once, sharp, demanding he wasn't finished showing them that he wanted them to follow. Ranger limped ahead of the Marines, leading them beyond the base perimeter and into the dense morning fog. His movements were slow but purposeful, every step fueled by something deeper than instinct. Miller and his team followed close behind, weapons ready, eyes scanning the tree line. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of boots and Ranger's strained breaths. After nearly a mile, Ranger stopped beside a patch of flattened grass. Miller knelt, brushing aside wet leaves to reveal boot prints. 2 sets, one deep and dragging, the other sharp and deliberate. "Cole," Miller whispered. He was here, and he wasn't walking on his own. Ranger moved again, nose low, following a faint trail of disturbed earth. They reached a small clearing where shredded pieces of fabric clung to branches. A torn strap from a tactical vest dangled like a warning. One Marine lifted it. "This is Cole's gear," he murmured. "But why leave it?" Ranger suddenly growled, pawing at the soil near a fallen log. Miller crouched to look and froze. The ground was gouged with marks of a struggle. Deep heel lines, clawed earth, and a single smear of fresh mud mixed with dried blood. Someone had fought here. Someone had been dragged away. Ranger barked urgently, pacing in circles before darting toward a narrow trail leading deeper into the woods. Pain slowed him, but determination pushed him forward. Miller exchanged a tense look with his team. "Whatever happened?" he said quietly. "Ranger saw it, and he's taking us there." They tightened their grips and followed the dog, straight into the unknown. Ranger pushed deeper into the woods, limping but relentless, until the trees thinned and a strange structure emerged from the fog, a rusted ventilation shaft jutting from the ground. It was old, hidden, and surrounded by footprints. Miller signaled his team to halt. "This isn't on any base map," he muttered. "Whatever this place is, it wasn't built by us." Ranger growled, pawing at the metal grate. Beneath it came a faint echo, metal doors, machinery, movement. The Marines exchanged alarmed glances. Someone was underground. Miller and two others pried open the grate. A stale, chemical-saturated draft wafted upward. Ranger whined, pacing nervously at the edge. He recognized the scent. It clung to Cole's ID tag. They descended a ladder into a dim tunnel lined with makeshift wiring and crates. This wasn't a bunker. It was a hideout, a base for people who didn't want to be found. Ranger sniffed a torn glove on the floor, then darted toward a narrow side passage. Miller followed to find a small room littered with restraints and tools. A chain bolt hung broken from the wall. "Cole was here," Miller whispered. "He escaped, or someone helped him." But Ranger wasn't focused on the room. He stared at the far door, tail stiff, trembling with alertness that a low human groan echoed from behind it. The Marines tensed, weapons raised. Ranger barked once, sharp, urgent, then pressed his shoulder against the door, forcing it open just enough for light to spill through. The truth struck instantly. This bunker wasn't abandoned, and Cole wasn't the only one inside. The moment Miller pushed the door open, a harsh beam of light cut across the narrow chamber. Ranger slipped inside first, low to the ground, every muscle locked in combat readiness. Miller followed, and his breath stalled. Staff Sergeant Cole lay slumped against the wall, wrists bruised, uniform shredded, eyes half open but alive. "Cole, it's Miller. Hang on," he whispered urgently. Cole blinked weakly, trying to form words. "Trap, not alone." Before Miller could respond, footsteps thundered from the tunnel behind them. Shadows shifted. Ranger spun around, teeth bared in a vicious snarl. Armed captors surged into the passageways, shouting orders as the Marines took defensive positions. "Contact! Multiple hostiles!" A Marine yelled. Gunfire erupted, echoing violently through the steel corridors. Ranger lunged forward, grabbing a masked attacker by the arm and dragging him off balance while the Marines advanced tactically through the cramped tunnels. The bunker shook with chaos, shouts, metal clashing, boots pounding on concrete. Miller reached Cole's side, lifting him carefully. "We've got you, brother. Ranger brought us here." Cole's eyes filled with fractured relief. He made it out, just to find help. Ranger barked sharply, signaling the final threat ahead. Guided by him, the Marines cleared the last chamber, forcing the remaining captors to surrender. The path was finally safe, and for the first time in months, Cole breathed without fear, because Ranger had returned to finish the mission they started together. The Marines guided Cole up the ladder and into the fading afternoon light. As soon as they reached the surface, Ranger limped forward and pressed his head against Cole's chest, whining softly. Cole dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around the dog who had refused to abandon him, even when the world thought he was gone. "You saved my life," Cole whispered, voice breaking. "You never stopped." Miller watched the reunion with a heavy exhale. "This dog walked miles, bleeding, starving, all to get us." The Marines nodded, shaken by the realization. Ranger hadn't just escaped. He'd carried the only clue that could lead them back. Back at the base, medics treated Cole and Ranger side by side. News spread quickly. The retired K-9 had single-handedly uncovered a criminal hideout, survived captivity, and led a rescue operation no human could have executed. When Cole reached for Ranger's paw, the dog lifted it willingly. Not as a soldier, but as family, mission complete.